There are all kinds of heavy controls over populations everywhere. And then the next thing that happens in this chess game that's being played is that biological weapons are released on China. You heard this being discussed in this meeting. They will release a flu-like virus that will be genetically targeted against the Chinese population. It's racially targeted against the Chinese people. It's designed to spread like wildfire and to knock out a large number of the Chinese people. And these people in this meeting were laughing about this. They said, China will catch a cold. Those were their words. China will catch a cold. The idea is that as the world looks upon this with horror, then they will demand from their governments that there are heavy controls over travel, over communication, over people who meet, over people who protest in the streets, and because people will be driven into fear by this, they'll request and demand and insist on heavy controls from their governments, which will be justified. And this is where you're going to kind of get the martial law situation in all the Western countries. It's intended as a justification. All of this is just the start of something, because the story gets much bigger, and it's pretty horrifying. And if watching this now you're feeling a little bit shocked, this is how I was feeling when I heard this information, and this is how our source was feeling when he was hearing this information in this meeting. This is just the beginning. There's a plan, I believe, that Hitler would be proud of, which is so evil, it's so Machiavellian, it's so hard to face up to, it's so unbelievable, that I need to put it on the table for you so that you can consider whether or not this might be a possibility. From Project Avalon and Project Avalon, and the date is the 16th of February, 2010. Now, this is a British person, and he worked in the British military for a number of years, and after he retired from the military, he worked in the City of London, in a fairly senior position, a respected position, in the City of London. And for those people watching this video who don't know about the City of London, the City of London is like, it's like an enclave, it's like a financial enclave in the heart of London itself. Some people consider it almost a little bit like the Vatican. It's very old, it's very ancient. It's the heart of the financial system, not only of Britain, but possibly the world. Many researchers consider that it's very likely that the City of London calls shots on the financial systems in America. They've got control of the Federal Reserve, the Bank for International Settlements, a whole bunch of things that happen. This is like the nerve center of the financial world. And it's very Masonic, it's very ancient, it's very traditional. And our source attended a number of meetings with senior Masons. And while many of these were interesting, they were routine by City of London standards. They were discussing financial affairs and so on and so forth. And then in June 2005, he attended another meeting that he thought was going to be a routine meeting, but actually this was something rather unusual. And he realized it was unusual as soon as he arrived. In fact, in his interview with us, the one which we have the transcript of, you will see that he says that he felt it was an accident that he was there. He shouldn't really have been there. He didn't know what was happening. And as such, he didn't really participate in the meeting. He was there as a little bit as a fly on the wall. He was just listening to what was happening. And at first he didn't even understand what was being discussed. The chief of police was there, representatives from the church, representatives from the military, 25 or 30 people. And as he listened to this story being discussed, it was an informal meeting. It wasn't like a big table with kind of notepads and water glasses and minutes and an agenda and a chairman. There were just people in a room who were talking about all of this stuff. Then they were talking about China and how powerful China was getting, both militarily and financially, very quickly, and that the Japanese weren't doing what they were supposed to do, which was to interfere in some way with the Chinese financial system. They weren't doing that, and this was another problem because China was getting too strong too quickly. Other things that were discussed were, for example, the coming financial crash, the centralization of resources, everything that we saw starting to happen in October 2008. They were planning that and referring to it in their meeting in June 2005. The plan is for either Iran or for China to retaliate after Iran is struck with a nuclear weapon. At that point, there will be a limited nuclear exchange in the Middle East, followed by a ceasefire. He heard this being planned in this meeting. This is being choreographed. It's like the script for a movie. This is exactly what's intended to happen. Then China is attacked by a biological weapon. It's a flu-like disease. It spreads like wildfire. This goes all over the world, and then they have a major Third World War. And then, by this time, 50% of the population will be destroyed. And not only because of the war or the plague, but because, as many of you watching this will understand, the infrastructure goes down in situations like this. There's no food in the supermarkets, there's no gas in the pumps, the telecommunication goes down, there may not even be water coming out of the taps. People are kind of thrown back into a Victorian era without the facilities to handle this, because most people don't have their vegetable gardens, they don't have their horse and cart, they're not able to survive in the way that we used to be able to. We're very, very vulnerable in our technological advance. Then what effectively will be a kind of plague will actually spread right across the world to the west as well. Our source was not clear whether this was a Chinese retaliation or whether the thing would just spread out of control in the way that it would be very understandable if it did, whether it's racially targeted or not. These things actually mutate. A pandemic that really is sweeping across the world and really is killing people very visibly, and you've got this totalitarian military lockdown in all the governments in the Western worlds because everyone's going to be in panic about all of this. And then, he said, then the real war starts, something that would be justifiably called the Third World War with a much more major nuclear exchange. And at this point, I asked him, is this just about population reduction? What is this about? Why are they doing this? Why this insane Dr. Strangelove plan for just unleashing all of this stuff on the world? Why do it? Now, he said absolutely it's about population reduction. So I said, well, in this meeting, did they mention any figures? And he said, yes, they did, 50%. Half the world's population. This is planned as per the Georgia Guidestones. For those of you who don't know what the Georgia Guidestones are, it's a stone monument in Georgia in America that was erected anonymously a number of years ago. It's in 8 languages, and it's like an Illuminati manifesto for a new world, as it were. And just hold that thought about this being a manifesto for a new world. This is an important concept here in what I'm presenting. One of the key parts of this manifesto for this new world is that there should be a population of 500 million people. Now, 500 million people is an enormous reduction from the nearly 7 billion we've got at the moment. That's pretty much 95% of people who would no longer be on this planet. who died in 1998, he was in the Office of Naval Intelligence in the US Navy. He talked to researcher Bill Burns, the editor of UFO magazine. And Bill Burns described this conversation with George Hoover to George Norrie from Coast to Coast AM. And what Admiral George Hoover told Bill Burns was the biggest secret, according to what the American Navy had found out. Very, very interesting story. They were talking about the Roswell visitors, and Admiral George Hoover said that these visitors were us from the future. They were time travelers. They weren't extraterrestrials. Now, other researchers and whistleblowers have spoken about the same thing, and this is fascinating in itself. But what Admiral George Hoover said the biggest secret really was, it had to do with the abilities and the power of the consciousness of these travelers. Because they were us from the future, what the military authorities had found out was what humans are really capable of. And he said that this had been buttoned up really tight, because if we knew how powerful we really were, how powerful we really could be, then we would, in his own words, cause chaos around us, and this would never be permitted. We could rearrange the reality around us in the way that we wanted to, in the way that, if this is real, that the future humans have learnt how to do, which gives them access to these sorts of incredible abilities, such as time traveling. Philip Corso, in his book, The Day After Roswell, described in some detail how his understanding was that the way the craft works was they were like an amplification of the pilot's own consciousness. It was their consciousness, it was their ability to travel and bilocate that was amplified by the craft, and that actually all of these abilities are basically abilities connected with the consciousness of the beings themselves. And if they are us, this is the message for all of us here. We're being deliberately dumbed down. Our food is being poisoned. Our children are being lied to in schools. We're being fed propaganda in the media. We're being forced into this tiny little box. We're being kept busy with game shows and ball games, and we are discouraged from really finding out what it is that is our heritage on this planet. Eric von Däniken has just published a book which is called History is Wrong. There's so much which we are denied. George Green describes that we are known as the useless eaters, this surplus population of billions of people, with a tiny number of people at the top of the heap who are dependent upon us to police each other and to laugh at each other and to stop each other from getting out of line, because we're encouraged to conform to how we're meant to be. And so there's this straitjacket that there's the opportunity for us to break out of, and it's this straitjacket which has been deliberately put in place by these very people who've been creating this plan. Where this plan originates from is very interesting to speculate. Our source told us that this has been in place for a long time. He first heard about the Anglo-Saxon mission as long ago as 1976. The Illuminati symbolism about the dawn of a new day has been going on for a long time. Many people think that this plan requires such a superhuman level of intelligence and strategic understanding, and is so ruthless and so cold, that the logic suggests, and David Icke says this, Jordan Maxwell says this, we say this ourselves with full agreement, that this didn't come from a human source. People aren't capable of doing this against other people. There's something else behind this. We have to think big. We have to think from the highest spiritual viewpoint that we possibly can do. That these people shouldn't be fought. What must happen is we just withdraw our consent from these things that are being done to us from this plan that we're part of. And as I was saying just before, if you're in the military or if you're in intelligence services, withdraw your consent from this, because these plans can't happen without it. The reason that I have for not believing that anything is fixed, that anything, that we're all doomed, that anything really bad is going to happen, I think we've got a lot of problems to solve, is because I wouldn't be here, and neither would you watching this now. I've incarnated on another planet. I've gone somewhere else. I'm not going to go and sit here in the firing line with no possible way of escaping. There's a job to do here, and many of you watching this will be aware of the fact that we're here to do jobs. It's what Dolores Cannon calls volunteers. We may be here for a reason. We may be here to help catalyze this increase in consciousness, and that's what's going to prevent this kind of thing from happening, because if we do not agree that this is the future that we want, then that's not what we're going to experience. We do all co-create our reality. We do all have a part in it, and I profoundly believe that by becoming aware of these plans, this is the way that we avert them. There's a difference between prediction and prophecy. These are two words in the English language that are easily confused with each other. Prediction and forecasting is saying, okay, in 3 months' time, this is what's going to happen because this is what the data leads us to conclude logically. That's all about forecasting and prediction. A prophet does something different, and it's a word to be used with care because it's often misused, it's often misunderstood, and it's like a biblical term, and some people react against it for that reason. But what a prophet always used to do is to say, listen, if we don't wake up, if we don't take action, then this is what's going to happen. And the purpose of the prophet giving this prophetic warning is not to warn people that it will happen, but to say, listen, you've got to change something here. You've got to change the way you're doing things, you've got to change the way that you're being, you've got to change the way you're interacting with each other, you've got to change your whole attitude. Whatever it is that you change, then the purpose of the change is so that this prophesied event doesn't happen. And so what we have here is we have a kind of prophecy. It's not a prediction. And I'm using this word very, very carefully because the reason why I'm making this statement, the reason why we're releasing this information is to make sure that this doesn't happen. To you in the military and intelligence services who may be watching this or may have had this brought to their attention, you don't have to do this stuff just because you're told. You need to support what's best for the human race. You don't need to follow orders if it's going to lead to a huge destruction here, which is in no one's interest apart from the controllers who have an agenda of their own, and that agenda doesn't feature you and me, that's for sure. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation. I want you to consider this information. I'm not urging you to believe it. I want you to research it. I want you to check it out. I want you to read the transcript carefully. And I want you to see whether this correlates with anything else that you know and understand that's come to your attention. We're all working together here. We're not trying to force you to believe anything at all. We need to be careful about this information. But at the same time, if there's any chance that this is true, if there's any chance that this is for real, then we have to know about it, okay? And if you are not sure what it is that you should be doing, then I say the same thing that I always say, which is do whatever it is that you came here to do. Because most of you watching this video are here for a reason. I do understand that you may not know what the reason is yet, but you're probably here for a reason. You're probably watching this video for a reason. Do whatever it is that you came here to do. This is Bill Ryan, Project Avalon, Project Camelot. It's the 16th of February, 2010. Thank you.